الله أكبر الله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الحمد لله ثم الحمد لله. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونستنصره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، إلها واحدا أحدا صمدا، لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. وأشهد أن نبينا وعظيمنا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وحبيبه. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين، وبعد. يقول جل جلاله في محكم التنزيل: إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم، وإذا أراد الله بقوم سوءا فلا مرد له وما لهم من دونه من وال. This verse in the Quran is probably one of the most overused ayat within the entirety of the Mus'haf. It is used so often that it sometimes loses its meaning for the people who listen to it. But still, there is within it a secret and an understanding and a comprehension that is extremely important for us as Muslims to carry with us. It is a law that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in His book for us to live by. And today is the last khutbah I'll give before we start talking about Ramadan, either preparing for it or going within Ramadan and then talking about aspects that relate to the holy month. And what I want to cover with you today is the summary of the Muslim survey that we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks that Dar al-Arqam Social Innovation Lab put together. And I went through the slides for you last week, and today I just want to summarize a few points for you. And there is a reason for why I want to do this. Because when we talk about change, when we look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying about change in the Quran, when He gives us that promise that I won't change your status unless you change. And this ayah, by the way, is more of a threat than it is of a law. He's threatening, I don't change your status from good to bad unless you do. So make sure you're watching out for yourselves. If you want things to stay going well, then you need to not change to the worse. Now, it applies for changing from being in a bad state to a good one, but it also works the other way around. What is it that we learned from this survey? Yes, granted, we only covered 600 and something families. And yes, most of the families were situated somewhere within the area that we exist here in northwestern London. And maybe we didn't get a very good sample from the southern eastern London population or the full eastern London population, which is, in my opinion, a much higher population than the northwestern population for sure. But still, I think we have a group, or we have some data that is helpful. I think we have a segment of society that we've looked at, and from that, we've been able to take some information that if we use or utilize appropriately, then we can learn from them, and we can learn from it and figure out what next steps need to occur for our community and for our society at large. And amongst them are these 4 summary points that you have up there. Our potential is very high within our community. That is clear. Our society is youthful. We are generally well educated. A lot of skill sets. There's a lot of wealth actually in our society. Most of those who answer this question are families. The potential for our society is very high. We have high potential. The problem is with actually the output, is figuring out how we're going to allow people to connect. You see, the gap between the very rich and the very poor in our society is huge. There's a huge gap. People who come in this community as immigrants make it for the first year or two, but then once their savings run out, at the third year mark, they start struggling. They start struggling on a social level, a financial level, on a spiritual level. There's a problem. Even though we have all of the tools, there's a lack of connection that's allowing us to make sure that we are bringing in, embracing those who are being added into our community and finding ways to integrate them. We have a problem with loneliness, with isolation, with social isolation. Too many people in our community feel alone, feel isolated. If they want to get married, or if they want to buy a house, or if they need a job, or if they're struggling with some form of discrimination, or they don't know what their actual rights are in the community, they don't have access to people who can help them. And they don't feel safe, unfortunately speaking, coming to masajid because they get turned away too often, because they don't find a response that is helpful for them. A part of that is that masajid themselves are not equipped and prepared to help the people who are coming in. And because of that, we have there's social isolation. There's lack of belonging. The sense of belonging is not strong. People don't feel like they're a part of the community. They come, they pray Jummah, they walk out. They're not interested in listening to anything that's being talked about. That is not the cliche. The cliche khutbah about remembering and being better and praying and all that stuff. When you talk about issues that are specific to the community, they're not interested. They don't want to get too involved because they don't feel like they belong. They feel this community belongs to someone else. They are just bystanders or visitors, which is not the case. Which should not be the case. Maybe it is, but it should not be. For sure, we have an issue with courage and wisdom as two things that seldom come together within our community. We either have too much courage and people end up getting upset and they yell about stuff and we don't end up getting anywhere, or there's no courage. There's clarity on what needs to be done, but there's fear. There's fear, especially parents, when it comes to their children, when it comes to their children's identity or their children's right within their schools, or their ability to go up to those who are supposed to be taking care of them and asking for their rights or asking for why things aren't getting better for them. We need there's a big trend within this survey was people feeling that they just didn't know who to go to and felt afraid and felt scared. I don't know if you've noticed, but over the last year and a half, I've never seen so much immigration happen from Canada outwards. I've never seen so many Muslims pack up and leave. It's actually quite alarming. Usually it's the other way around. People trying to get in. You're trying to help your family members from another place where they're persecuted to get in here. Now people actually want to get out. It's not just because of the financial slum that we're in. There's other elements that affect this as well. And a part of that is feeling that there's lack of that courage. And that courage is not something that's individual. It's a communal problem. When we lack the backbone to speak up for ourselves and teach people to do the same. Mental health is an issue that is ongoing. It's been in our community for a long time and it has not actually improved that much. There's still a lot of taboo regarding these diagnoses. We still have people linger around for years, diagnosing them with insane things like a magic spell or some jinni inside of them or some other crazy claim that you have no way to actually verify or even treat if it is the case, and people get moved around for years from one place to the other with no access to actual health care, to professionals who can actually help them. And by the time they do, they're so far into their problems that it's hard to actually help them anymore. Just because we're a faithful society doesn't mean that we don't struggle with mental health problems. If your leg breaks, you don't bring your kid to the masjid asking me to do ruqya for them, do you? You take them to be cured, to be treated. If you understand ruqya, you'll do it anyways. If you understand what ruqya is, you'll do it even when the leg is broken after they get their surgery, whatever they need. When the brain breaks, when the psyche is broken, it needs the same thing. Ruqya, but it needs also a professional. And mental health is something that people are struggling with, on anxiety and depression and other forms of mental health disorders that we have to do better with caring for our vulnerable the vulnerable ones in our society. There's a need for social innovation. What we found in this survey is that we're very good at describing the problems, like describing where the deficits lie, what's failing, what's not working. We can describe it. There's very little attempt to solve anything. There's very little attempt to come up with solutions. There's no systematic way of doing it. It's not in Masajid or out of it do we have a systematic approach to problems and what solutions can be done. There's a lot of fear in trying a problem, because if you try a problem and it doesn't work out, then you're going to be eaten alive by those who aren't willing to do anything. Those who just sit there and criticize everything are going to eat you alive when you try to solve a problem and it doesn't work out for you. So people tend not to want to get too involved. But Islam is the whole legacy is a social innovation lab. That's what Islam is. Islam came and looked at all the problems of society and solved them through the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have it already. We have the approaches. We have the solutions. We just need the way, the how to get there. We need people who are willing to do that, take that on themselves as a part of of what they owe the ummah, what they owe their community, what they owe themselves, picking that up. The rest of us sit around and watch. Now, why am I talking about this? Because I haven't seen ever, historically, and I'm in my late 30s at this point, I've never seen what's happening in the Holy Land happen elsewhere in the format that it's happening. See, within the power of struggle, the struggle of power that exists within the story of the human race, the struggle of power has always had certain laws. The courtiers always knew that if you didn't follow the laws of ethics and moral publicly, then you couldn't get ahead. You can't come out and say, I hate this group of people, I want to kill them all. That's not going to work for you. Even if everyone thinks it, even if you think it, you can't say it out loud because it'll take away your ability to have power in the world. You have to act like you abide by certain ethical laws. You have to. This is the first time historically that I've seen that not be cared for anymore. Even what happened before, years before, there's been a lot of atrocities that have happened elsewhere in the world. But at least when they talk about the topic, it is at least played as if there's some ethicality from their standpoint. Today, the veto has no explanation to it. It's just, that's it. That's that. There. I'm vetoing it and I don't care. I have no explanation for you. I've never seen that before. It's very alarming and it's very concerning to me because that changes things. That changes a lot. When publicly we just don't care. When we say, no, you can bomb these hospitals, You can kill civilians. You can have children as we speak being pulled out of the rubble on an hourly basis. You can take a population and shove them into a small area and then just destroy them and kill them and starve them to death with no explanation whatsoever, with no actual rationalization or an attempt to try and explain why that's happening. That's unheard of. That's unheard of. There has to be, at least from groups that claim to be representative of people. There are totalitarian dictatorships in the world that don't try and do that. We understand that. That's why you're here. Most of you are here because you ran away from that. But now, these governments that actually represent people have nothing to offer. Yeah, well, it's happening, so it's going to happen. They have no explanation. They're not even willing to, no, they're not going to defend it, nor are they going to explain it. It's going to be just, I've never seen that before. Extremely alarming, very, very concerning. That's where we are right now. And it says something about our status as an ummah. These people who are being killed, they're not like us. They are us. There's a big difference. Like no, they're not like us. They are us. These are the same names, the same background, the same everything. We are a part of one nation. There is no difference between a Muslim, regardless of where they live or what they look like. Technically speaking, if you want to understand Islam appropriately, there's no difference between a human being and another human being or any living thing. The sanctity of human life is not debatable within our deen. It's interesting, though, that he says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he talked about أَنَّهُ مَنْ قَتَلَ نَفْسًا بِغَيْرِ نَفْسٍ أَوْ فَسَادٍ, that verse that talked about the fact that if you kill someone unlawfully, it's like you murdered the human race, and if you bring someone back to life, if you're able to save a life, it's like you saved the human race. It's interesting at the beginning of that verse, he says, مِنْ أَجْلِ ذَلِكَ كَتَبْنَا عَلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل. Just something to keep in mind as we observe what's happening. Now, what's the point of these two things, the survey and this? Because wallahu a'lam, change can happen. I'm going to be very, very specific with my choice of words here. I'm not saying change is happening or will happen. I don't sell illusions. I'm not going to sell you some false hope and put you in a position of wishful thinking. I don't know if change is happening or will happen. I have no information, no way to verify or validate that, yes, this is the beginning of a new era. I don't know that. So I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to talk to you about that which is factual. What is factual is that we have the potential to change. We can, meaning we don't lack any of the tools that are needed to change. We don't lack any of the tools. We have all of them. You see, some people historically wanted to change, but they couldn't because they lacked tools. Either they didn't have leadership, they didn't have guidance, they didn't have resources, financial or social, their numbers were too low, didn't have enough youth. So they couldn't change and they were stuck in a bad situation for a long time. But for us, we don't have that problem. The potential to change is there because we have all of the tools. We're a youthful community. We're a wealthy community. We have numbers. We have leadership. And we have guidance. We have a way of life. So it's just a matter of something different. It's something different. To actually get there is something different. We're not lacking tools. If we were, I would stand here and say, look, here's what we're missing as an ummah, as a community to change. But that's not the case. We're not lacking anything. We have it all there. What's missing is the willpower. It's a belief that you should have about yourself. It's a belief that you have to have about yourself. That you are important when it comes to the equation of change. That you have to do it. It has to start with you. Yes, one Muslim in some city that no one knows about. And if you say the name of the city, they think it's in a different country altogether. With a small population of 36,000 people. Yes, in the heart of a Muslim there, you can spark change that will lead to a different reality in the near future or far future. Yes, it is very possible, but you have to believe that yourself. Like it has to be something that you understand, that you comprehend. It's a part of your upbringing. It's a part of your legacy as a Muslim. And if you don't see that, if you don't feel that, and you continue, there's no point of me and you and I arguing over the bigger picture politics. I don't have a seat at that table. No one listens to me there. No one listens to you either. So there's no point in arguing the bigger countries. What we can argue is us. What we can actually talk about is the change that can happen from us. That's where it began anyways. Go back to the basics. Go back to the basics. Go back to his life, alayhi salatu wasalam. He started with people, with simple individuals who believed something in themselves. It started with Ali and Zubayr and Talha. And it started with Bilal ibn Rabah and Ammar ibn Yasir, with people who had very little reason to believe that they could make a difference in this world. It started with Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, and people who were teens at the time didn't feel that they had any say in the world, and yet that's where change began. Change, it started in their hearts. It can start right now, in your heart as I speak to you. No one can see it. No one can feel it. No one will know about it, but it's something that changed inside of you that leads you to lead a different life later. And that's where change comes from. And we have to believe that's the case. Like, you have to understand that that's how Islam is built. Because if you attend this khutbah and then after you walk out and continue to live your life the way you were living before and expect somehow things to change in an externally from you, then you're misguided. If I think I can afford to live life the way I've been living it and then somehow things will change, I don't understand this equation. That's not how this works. He made it a law in the Quran. He explained it. You know the verses that we talked about in Surah Al-Anfal? إن يكن منكم 20 صابرون يغلبوا 200 وإن يكن منكم 100 يغلبوا 1000 من الذين كفروا بأنهم قوم لا يفقهون الآن خفف الله عنكم وعلم أن فيكم ضعفا فإن يكن منكم 100 صابرة يغلبوا 200 وإن يكن منكم 1000 يغلبوا 2000 بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين. Where he talks about, as Muslims, a man is worth 10 in his impact, his influence. One is worth 10. And then now I see, this is the ayah, I see that there's weakness in you. So one is worth 2. So it was downgraded. Never in his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, did that downgrading actually occur. Never in his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, did the Muslims, this was a warning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to them. If you become weak, then it's downgraded. Your influence, your impact is downgraded. Never happened during his life, alayhi salatu wasalam. The only time it was 1 to 2 was in Hunayn and they almost lost. Everything else was 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 15, it was way beyond 1 to 10 even. And this is something that is worthy of our contemplation. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه يغفر لكم يا فوز المستغفرين استغفر الله. الحمد لله وحده وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اتبع نهجه ووفى عهده. إخواني وأخواتي، خطبتي اليوم خطبة مكررة عن موضوع مكرر يقوله إنسان يكرر نفسه يسمعه أقوم قد كرروا أنفسهم وهم يعيشون هذا التكرار. لمئات السنين يقف المشايخ على المنابر فيتحدثون عن ضعف ويتحدثون عن الانهزام ويتحدثون عن قلة الإيمان وعن البعد عن الله، والناس يستمعون ويهزون رؤوسهم، ثم يخرج الناس إلى حالهم ما قبل الخطبة ويعود الإمام إلى ما كان عليه وهلم جرا وهلم جرا. ونعيد الكرة مرة بعد مرة. إذا أراد المسلم أن يرى واقعا مختلفا، إذا رغبت في قلبك أن ترى يوما ما إنسان يقف في مثل مقامي هذا على منبر كهذا يقول كلاما مختلفا عن واقع مختلف، لا يكون فيه دم المسلم بهذا الرخص ولا يكون فيه مروءة المسلم بهذا الرخص، فعلى الإنسان أن يتغير. التغير يبدأ من الفرد ثم يذهب إلى المجتمع ككل. لا طائل من مناقشة الدول والحديث عن الحكومات والحديث عن أولئك الذين تسلطوا على البشر ليشربوا من دمائهم وليسلبوا أموالهم، ولكن الحديث اليوم عن الإنسان الذي يجلس في بيت الله وعن حاله مع الله. تريد أن ترى حالا متغيرا، حالا مختلفا فيه نصرة للإسلام والمسلمين، ولا ترى أن هذا التغير يبدأ منك، فقد جهلت الدين كله. والله ما عقل الدين ولا فهمه رجل ظن أو امرؤ ظن أن التغير سيحصل في هذا الكون ولا يبدأ من نفسه أو يبدأ من خارجه. أبدا، يستحيل هذا الكلام، يستحيل. وإنما التغيير يبدأ من الفرد ولا يأتي من العدم. هذا قانونه سبحانه وتعالى، قد لا يعجب الكل لكن هذا قانونه. He said عليه الصلاة والسلام in the hadith narrated by Imam Bukhari, Abdullah ibn Umar tells us, the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام says, إنما الناس كالإبل المئة لا تكاد تجد فيها راحلة. People are like when you have 100 camels, you can barely find one that's dependable and reliable. You can barely find one that's dependable and reliable and that shows some initiative and leadership. It's few people who have that ability to be dependable and reliable. Most people don't. You think this is the Muslim community? No. This is not the Muslim community. The majority of the Muslim community don't come for Jummah. The majority of the Muslim community don't come for Jummah. If all the Muslim men in this community came for Jummah, we need 4 more masajid as big as LMM to actually take them all in. Maybe a third show up for Eid, maybe. At the best estimation, maybe a third show up for Eid. The rest don't. My question for you is, are you amongst that few? See, the Quran talks about the few. وَقَلِيلٌ مِّنْ عِبَادِيَ الشَّكُورِ. And a few of my servants will truly be thankful and grateful. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَقَلِيلٌ مَّا هُمْ. Few people actually understand what it means to internalize their understanding of Allah and then live that impact and live what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught. Very few. So the question for you is, are you amongst that few or not? I am telling you, whether you like it or not, you are. You're amongst the few. Because the majority of Muslims aren't practicing. And you're in this masjid, so that means you're amongst that few. And if that few doesn't have the intention of change, doesn't have the intention of actually taking their lives and turning it around for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for the sake of a future that is brighter for themselves and their children, then what hope is there? What can we possibly hope for if that's not going to happen? It's very possible. The potential is there. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but the potential is there. You just have to understand that you're capable and that you can have weight. You can have weight, not physical weight. You can have weight in your community where you can impact and you can influence and you can change things. You can do it. If you ever go and study Sirat ibn Ishaq or ibn Hisham, either of them, and you open the book and you read, and you go through year number 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, those years are just one story after the other of persecution and torture. The Prophet ﷺ himself physically ﷺ was being tortured. His reputation was being ruined psychologically. In every way he was being mistreated. And all the Sahaba the same. Some of them were being laid on live coal until their backs burnt and they couldn't stand straight anymore. Some of them were being smoked until they couldn't breathe anymore. Some of them were being killed. They were being murdered. And then in the midst of all these stories that are just very sad, there's always a chapter where they talk about the Islam of 2 people. There's a lot of people accepting Islam during this period, but they're not talked about. We don't have like a chapter of Fasl fi Islam fulan. No. But these 2 individuals, there's a chapter in every book of Sirah that talks about their Islam as if it's a cosmic incident. As if it's an extraterrestrial event that's worthy of just stop. But that happened. What happened? What was so important as people are being killed and murdered and mistreated and persecuted and tortured? Yeah, but then Hamza accepted Islam. Then Hamza accepted Islam. Why? Because of the weight of that person. It was the impact that person had on the people. Ibn Umar would say, I was always afraid until Hamza accepted Islam, and then I always knew I could go and ask him for protection if someone said something to me. Umar ibn Khattab accepted Islam. It was its own chapter, its own thing. It's an event worthy of stopping and telling the story. Other people accept Islam all the time in the Sirah. We don't have events about them, but this guy did. Ibn Mas'ud would go ahead and say, we were humiliated until Umar accepted Islam. Then we had integrity. I could pray in front of the Kaaba openly. No one dare speak to me because they know Umar had told them, you leave him. If you speak to him, then you have to deal with me. And this is not about strength, physical strength. I'm talking about impact. Amr ibn al-As later on. This story is in Kanz al-Ummal al-Muttaqi al-Hindi. You can find the actual wording of the story there. Amr ibn al-As went on a conquest to conquer Egypt. And he struggled in the midst of it. He couldn't go beyond a certain point. So he sent to Umar al-Khattab asking for some help. Troops. He wanted 8,000 troops. That's what he needed. So Umar al-Khattab would send him troops. Amr ibn al-As is standing on a mimbar to see in the horizon because he's trying to figure out how many troops were sent. So he's looking, and it's half of what he wants. It's literally half. Like he wasn't hoping for the 8, but he was hoping for like 7 or 6. He got 4. So he's standing there, he's very upset. But then coming from the horizon is someone on horseback who has Umar ibn al-Khattab's letter, his kitab. So he's given to Amr ibn al-As, he opens the kitab, he reads it, and this is what it said. قال قد أمددتك ب4 آلاف رجل على كل 1000 رجل منهم مقام 1000 فإنك إن سئلت بما أمدك عمر تقول أمدني ب8 آلاف وإن قلت ب4 ضربت عنقك. He told him, I sent you 4,000 people. Leading each 1,000 is one man, which was worth 1,000. So when you're asked what I sent you, you will say 8,000 people. And if you say 4,000, I will take off your head. So Amr ibn al-As, of course, out of fear, said, fine. He sent to him Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, and Miqdad ibn al-Aswad, and Ubadah ibn al-Samit, and Maslama ibn Makhlad, radiyallahu anhum ajma'een. When he finished the conquest of Egypt, he sent back to Umar saying, لو لم ترسل إلي إلا الأربعة نفر لكفى. You didn't have to send the 4,000. All you had to send with those 4 people have been enough. to have weight, to have that impact in a society, to be someone who sees the need, sees the gap, and goes for it. They're not distracted. They don't wait for confirmation. They're not waiting for people to applaud them or offer them permission. They see the need and they go for it because they feel ownership upon this ummah, because they feel that they belong, that this is my story, that Islam is your story. You have to feel that. And then you will have impact and influence. And then a person can be worth 1,000 or 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000 or whatever number is that it goes on to. Or we can stay exactly the way we are. Or we can stay exactly the way we are. I give this khutbah and you leave and you live your life the same way, and so do I. And we expect somehow, miraculously, that things will change, even though nothing has changed internally for us. Nothing's been sparked and there's no intention of turning things around in any form. Brothers and sisters, if you are tired of watching the news and seeing children in shock or dead with their parents mourning them, if this is something that you don't want to continue to watch, have you ever thought about how many Muslim countries have been in turmoil over the years? I'm only 38, but I can count for you what I remember. Kosovo and Kashmir, parts of Pakistan and Hind till this day, Myanmar, China, Somal, Sudan, Libya, Algeria, Tunis, Egypt, Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, the miserable country I come from, Syria, and the ongoing Holy Land. And that's all what I can remember, standing here without a paper in front of me that has written down all of the atrocities that have occurred. If you don't want that to continue to be the case in the future, then tell me, what is it that you're going to do about it? What are you going to change? It has to start with that. It has to start from something on the inside. What is going to change? How are you going to be different? In what way? Do you feel that this ummah is yours? Do you feel responsible? Do you have ownership? Do you feel that you can be someone who has impact? Are you willing to do that? Or you just want to keep on coming here listening, and then someone like me stands here and complains and talks about death, and everyone just feels bad for a few moments. We make dua, we walk out, and we continue normally. I don't know. I, for one, am tired. It's hard to continue to watch all this. It's hard without at some point you just feel, why are we doing it? What's the point? What's the point? Is there a point? Of course there is. But you have to see change. We have the potential. My khutbah today is the potential is there. Change can happen. I'm sorry, all I can tell you is can. I can only use that. That's the only word I can use. I can't say is, I can't say will. I can't. I'll be lying to you if I did. I'll be selling you wishful thinking just to make you feel better. But I don't know. I know that can. For sure. Absolutely can. We absolutely can. And that's what needs to be thought about. And that's maybe the intention you take in your heart before Ramadan. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the ability, inshallah ta'ala, to be better and to do better. I hope that was a benefit to you. واعلموا أن الله أمرنا بأمر عظيم فقال إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد وارض اللهم عن الأربعة الخلفاء السادة الحنفاء أبي بكر وعمر وعثمان وعلي وارض اللهم عن أزواجه أمهات المؤمنين وعن آله الطيبين الطاهرين وعن صحابته الغر الميامين وعن التابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعنا معهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات اللهم فرج هموم المهمومين ونفس كروب المكروبين وارفع الغم عن المغمومين وارفع الظلم عن المظلومين واحقن دماءنا ودماء المسلمين اللهم فرج هموم إخواننا المستضعفين في غزة فلسطين وفي السودان وفي غيرها من بلاد الأرض يا رب العالمين اللهم انصر إخواننا المرابطين في كل مكان اللهم رد المسجد الأقصى إلى رحاب المسلمين أخرج الصهاينة منه أذلة صاغرين يا رب العالمين ارزقنا أجمعين فيه صلاة قبل الممات اللهم ردنا أجمعين إليك وإلى دينك ردا جميلا وتب علينا اللهم من جميع ذنوبنا توبة نصوحا طهرنا بها قلبا وجسدا وروحا وما ذلك عليك اللهم بعزيز اللهم بلغنا رمضان اللهم بلغنا شهر رمضان اللهم بلغنا شهر رمضان ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون Inshallah ta'ala, starting from tomorrow we will begin the Ramadan prep sessions. I'll share with you inshallah ta'ala the plan for Ramadan so you know what's happening before Ramadan and throughout the holy month of Ramadan inshallah ta'ala. أقم الصلاة